Hi
Hello.
there, everybody.
This is it. This is our
Last lesson.
last lesson.
Not
yes.
the last time that we will ever meet.
Yes. So we'll see you again next week
Mm-hmm.
for our party.
Yeah, and we have some exciting news about that.
Yeah.
That you'll have to stick around for the entire class to find out what that exciting news is.
Yeah.
This is usually how I work with my students too. I bribe them to stick around.
I don't know that your students have
Hmm?
any options about.
Oh yeah, no, but you mean I don't have to pay every kid $20 at the end of class? I'd be a lot more financially solvent. So, here we are. We have one final lesson, and it's about something that people have been asking us for since literally week 1.
I'm really, really excited for this one.
Mm-hmm.
And this has definitely been a lesson like I've been looking forward to this whole time, and I'm really glad that it worked out, that it's our last one.
Mm-hmm.
And it's also going to kind of serve as a review for stuff we've done before.
Yep, we're going to recover a bunch of the things that we've covered before, because when we're talking about putting together a whole season, we are also going back to the fundamentals of how a story works. We're just doing it at a scale that is way too big for one brain to comprehend. And we're going to talk about how to do that.
Okay, so before we get into it, let's just talk about what we're supporting this week and how you can support us if you would like to.
Mm-hmm.
So we've left a link in the description as always. This time it is actually a Twitter thread, which I know can be a little bit cumbersome, but it is a thread of links for Black trans women's transition GoFundMes. And I would have felt too bad picking just one of them, because how would you ever pick? So
Right.
I decided to just link to the thread. So if you have been enjoying these workshops and you would like to thank us in some way, this is how you can do it. So take a look at that Twitter thread, and if you have the means, we hope that you will support somebody's transition.
Yeah.
Which would be so great.
And you know, if and when you do send some money one of their ways, like, feel free to reach out and tell us about it. I know it always feels weird and like performative to talk about money that you give, but
we will say thank you so much.
Exactly. We want to thank you for the contributions that you made, and we know people have made contributions throughout the last couple months.
And thank you for all of that.
For real. For real.
Yeah.
Time to share some snippets for this week.
Submission time. Oh my gosh, we should have had like a little jingle for that this whole time.
Mm.
Ugh, regrets.
Yeah, I'm already predicting this is not the last time that we'll ever live stream. So
That's probably true.
Yeah.
So we'll keep that in mind.
Lessons for the future.
Jingles.
Do you want to go first in terms of sharing the submission? Our prompt this week was 200 words of the thing that you are currently revising, preferably not something from the very beginning.
Yes. Sure, I will go first. This week I am reading a submission from Cactus Bee. It is an excerpt from their piece, The Lighthouse at Godsend. He hands me a handkerchief, edged with pearl pink and so fine as to let the light seep through. I promise you, it's only ever been because I like you. I think nobody has ever done anything just because they liked me. And who would, who needs food to eat and money in their wallets? For a moment, I think he's been lying to me all this time, that he really is a gentleman, playing at being a neo-Viking like a child playing store. Rich men can send people presents and pretend their expectations were always clear. But no, his mother was a fisherwoman, and his father kept a village library, far away in Apime. And Tybalt only owns his ship because he slit a soul rifter's throat, and I know this not because he told me, but because it's what all the papers ferreted out and ran years ago, when I was still a housebreaker and had Abelard pleading to make an honest woman of me. That the Navigational Authority had so thoroughly failed that a soul rifter ever prowled, Abe said, was proof enough that I was nearer to a pinned butterfly than to a house cat, knowing where my meals would come from. Except for him wanting me. Well, I'm not honest, nor a woman neither, and Satu Tybalt, and my chest hurts from love, because this man knows, and yet likes, and asked, but gently.
Wow, that is really beautiful.
I love it.
It stands on its own really well.
Mm-hmm. There's so much world building in there.
There really
I mean,
is.
I assume that it's not introduced in this way, that this is building on stuff that's already been set up and developed earlier in the piece. But it's true, it does kind of work well as a standalone because all of those mentions of things that we don't really have context for, the Navigational Authority, a Neo-Viking, Soul Rifters, lots of stuff. And also just like the naming conventions are kind of unfamiliar. Yeah, so it does work really well as world building either way, but it's just, the reason I picked this is because it felt very emotionally honest, and I think it has to do with being trans, but sort of expanded in a very lovely way. I love I'm not honest nor a woman neither. I think that's a really beautiful way to make it clear.
Sentences that do multiple things at the same time.
Yes.
Right?
It's poetic, and it's referential, and it tells us something about the character.
Right.
I think it's beautiful.
That's really fantastic. Who did you say that was by?
That is by Cactus Bee.
Cactus Bee, thank you very much, whether you be cactus or bee.
Yeah, good work. I really like that.
I cheated a little bit in the one that I picked. I'm going to admit that right now. But because this is actually a piece of flash fiction. It's 200 words long.
Cool.
And I wasn't going to pick it because I know that it's not in the middle of something. But then I read it, and it is so intensely for me. It is like exactly what I like, and I think it's very good. And so I couldn't not.
Let's hear it.
This is called Storm Story. It is by AM. Let's take a look if my phone will catch up. There we go. The smell of ozone and ocean mist meant one thing. There was a storm on the horizon. Once she was sure that every door was locked, every window made waterproof, it was time to hunker down at the old wooden kitchen table to bear the night. Rain began to come down in sheets, the house groaning in protest. She turned the pages of her book with a white-knuckled grip. Her eyes tried furiously to stay on the page, consuming the words, but processing nothing. All she could do was listen, as the wailing winds cried their morning song louder. It was curious, you see, how often rolling waves across the ocean sounded like a human voice to her. Please, the wind that took her mother's voice begged, please, darling, let me in. It's cold out and my bones hurt. Her eyes became fixed on the sturdy window shutters that the storm beat upon. 1 minute, she was sad. In the next, she found her hand was inches away from the latch, fingers ready, resting on the cool iron, or fingers nearly resting on the cool iron. For just a moment, she had the overwhelming urge to throw the window open and welcome in the storm. Shaking the damp smell of old sea-salted wood from her head, she returned to her seat but did not pick up the book again. All she did was listen to the sounds of the storm outside and the light snoring of her elderly mother asleep upstairs in her bed.
Cool.
The mood here is so intense.
Yeah.
It has such good vibes. It has terrible vibes, but it has terrible vibes done well.
I really like the voice.
The voice is fantastic. It's interesting how this does one of my favorite things, which is I'm gonna nerd out for a second. Apologies. But it is about a fairly mundane situation, but it talks about that mundane situation using the beats of horror. So we get the reveal that, we have the horrifying moment of, quote unquote, hearing the mother's voice outside. But then at the end, we find out the mother is also inside.
Right.
So this pleading is clearly something relevant to this person's life, right? And so really we just got a peek into her mind. I love it. Also, I like stories about the ocean. So this was you hit the bullseye for me specifically.
It's good.
And I really, really appreciate that.
Good work.
Thank you. Okay, I think with that we're ready, right?
We're ready.
Okay. Let's get started. Today's lesson is, so you want to write a bunch of little stories that all turn into one really big story after a really long time. I think there's a name for that, but I can't remember what. Today we are talking about serial stories, like the ones that we have.
Yay!
Right?
Yay!
And how to put them together. So we're going to take a look at an example of a serial story arc that you might know. I suspect most of the people here know it. And Sophie, if I'm not mistaken, you are going to lead us on this.
So I'm going to take you through the plot beats of a serial story arc that you might be familiar with. So, The first major beats we get in this storyline, we introduce our main character, Juno, and we get the setup of a romantic plotline. The next major discovery that we have is that there is a pattern of disappearing Martian artifacts. Then the romantic interest develops. Then the characters realize that they have to do something, which is stop Miasma, who has been collecting these Martian artifacts. Then they get kidnapped by Miasma. Then her full plan is revealed. Eventually she's defeated. And at the end, Juno decides to stay in Hyperion City without Nureyev. So, does this look, before we get to the next slide, I think, I want to know if this looks familiar to anybody.
Yeah, you put it on the slide in a weird shape. That was
yes.
That was an odd graphic design choice.
Yes. So I want you to hop into the live channel and tell me if this reminds you of anything, if this looks familiar, if this seems like anything that perhaps we have talked about before.
Hop on in, let us know. Does this remind you of anything that we talked about before? For clarity's sake, these acronyms, just so you know, are the episodes that we're referring to, right?
Yes.
Murderous Mask, Prince of Mars, Train from Nowhere, Final Resting Place.
Yeah, so why the weird shape?
Let's see what people got. It's always so exciting when it says people are typing.
Oh, I know.
It's like I'm waiting for
Thrilling.
a present.
Oh my gosh, several people, update, several people are typing. Yes, everybody is saying it looks, well, somebody said it looks like a staircase. But we're getting a lot of plot map, plot arc, story arc, the 5-point plot structure, like IDK just out on a limb here, maybe like IDK just guessing like a plot arc, plot map, yes. I think you all get where we're going with this. So the point is that the major plot beats of this overall arc fit into essentially the same shape on a very broad scale, and we will get to this. So we talked about in, I think, our very first workshop, this plot outline, and we were talking about in the context of just one episode or one story, but actually it also applies to a broader season arc.
Yeah. Now, Sophie, you worked very hard to put this together.
Yes.
And I don't mean to just absolutely trash you, just absolutely throw you in the garbage where you belong.
Go ahead, trash me.
But this is forgetting all of my favorite parts of season 1.
Yes.
Straight up and down.
Yes, you all may be noticing that there's lots of things missing.
There are. In fact, I think it's missing... Yeah, I think it's actually missing my 3 favorite episodes from season 1. So what about the parts of season we didn't talk about?
What about that?
How do we make that fit, right? Because if we take a look, Day That Wouldn't Die and Midnight Fox get totally skipped over somewhere around here.
Right.
Angel of Brahma gets totally skipped over somewhere around here.
Right.
And not only are those my favorites, I think that especially Angel of Brahma, but also Day That Wouldn't Die, tends to be crowd favorites too.
Yeah.
So we can't just give you this arc and tell you that in order to plan a season, it's the same as planning a small story, because it's just not.
Right.
Instead, what Sophie and I ended up doing, which was a really interesting exercise, is we've been doing this by instinct for a while, I think. And these are basically what we're trying to do is reverse engineer for you all what those instincts are. So, reverse engineering our method, there are really 3 steps in terms of planning out the arc for an entire season, right? First, we sketch key moments. Then we revise the plan for dramatic shifts dynamic shifts between episodes. And then we adjust in the moment for mood, character development, and intrigue or fun.
So basically what we were just showing you was just that sketch.
Right, exactly. And remember, we've said this a bunch of times, but the pursuit of fun is enough of a pursuit. It is hard enough to pull off that we have to put it as a huge priority, right? So, what we just showed you was basically the sketching stage. These are the major beats in the season, the things that before we even started, we knew had to happen in some way. You might notice that when I went through this, I changed some of the phrasing a little bit, right? Instead of being kidnapped, it's Miasma's winning somehow. I don't have specify what Miasma's plan here is. And that's because when we first started, we didn't completely know. We had some theories. And so it's not like we were ever going to say, like, there's just no answer to the mystery. Sorry, folks. But we weren't super satisfied with those answers, and we were ready for better ones to come up. We were talking about this earlier, but I think that like my earliest thought about Miasma's plan was some like immortality thing, which has been done to death, especially with that kind of character.
Yeah.
Um,
So, like, what finally ended up being revealed in Final Resting Place, we didn't really figure out until
we didn't really figure out until
we were writing it.
Yeah, until we were partway through Train from Nowhere, I would say.
Yeah.
So in the sketch, we both plan out the major moments in the season, the plot points that broadly create this arc, right? We have the answers for everything, but we know that those answers may shift, and that's a good thing if they shift, right? That relates back to something that we talked about a while ago, which is if you try to plan everything on one day and stick to that plan rigidly, you are just allowing one person to do all the thinking,
Right.
and individuals, including yourself, on any given day, including me on any given day, are really, really dumb. Like, really, really can't hold much in their brains. However, if you turn it into a cooperative effort between many versions of you over many days, you can come up with way more ideas over time.
Well, also,
right?
like, the later versions of yourself are going to be smarter and better.
Exactly.
So you really don't want to leave them out of the process.
Absolutely. If you've ever, been working on a story for a while and you find that you're getting really bored with it, or you think that the premise isn't exciting as when you started, sometimes you just grew as a writer while you were doing it, and it might be time for a new project. There are some problems with sticking to this structure too exactingly, right? Sticking to it too rigidly will leave some portions of the season really monotonous. The whole season might be engaging, but if a string of episodes are just evenly rising tension, they become predictable, right? Think about if in here, right, there was no let up in Day That Wouldn't Die came right out of Prince of Mars and just got more and more tense, and then just kind of nothing resolved, and then we went to Midnight Fox and it did the same thing. It would be miserable, right? It would be a terrible combination of stressful and dull, I think. Also, the standard denouement, or the standard ending, doesn't give you momentum going into the next storyline. If you reset back to zero, the audience often feels like their time has been wasted and nothing in the story actually mattered. That is a complaint we actually got a lot about season 1. When Juno left Nereid, a lot of people said that we were resetting everything back to zero.
Did they?
They did. They absolutely did. They still do, in fact.
Sillies.
Yeah, and I think that ultimately what we ended up needing to show is, like, the show is about other things, right? Those things have not reset back to zero. So, if we just take these dots, right?
It's like a constellation.
It is like a constellation.
Pretty.
Right, it's the big season. Now we just have these dots. This is our sketch, right? The dotted line we had before was basically the plot arc. When we revise, we start thinking about shifts in tension in a way that's more engaging, right? So now I've added Day That Wouldn't Die and Midnight Fox to this, right? So I think that people generally agree that Day That Wouldn't Die is by far the most stressful episode at that point, and it's the most stressful episode for a while after.
Yes.
It's really, really intense. Midnight Fox starts off a fun romp, and it's not until like the last second that it gets really intense.
Yes.
Right? So, some things that we considered when we were putting this together, right? Varying the season in terms of tension prevents the audience from getting exhausted. We talked about how if it was just a steady increase, it would be both boring and incredibly stressful, right? Ultimately, people are showing up, they want to enjoy this or find it satisfying. And so we need to work towards that as much as we can. Do you want to say something?
No, once you cover what's on the slide.
So part of the reason that Day That Wouldn't Die is ineffective is because we are so used to that plot arc that we don't expect an intense tension spike here. So when we do this, it's very surprising, especially since the setup of Day That Wouldn't Die mirrors that. It starts off and it's just Juno's going to visit his old friend, right? And then it turns into a trauma nightmare from 30 years ago.
You'd love to see it.
Then after Day That Wouldn't Die, could we have gone even harsher? I guess. Right, but by alternating harsh episodes and fun episodes, we keep the shifts intense enough to excite. I think it's pretty standard in our show that if you look for the episodes that people generally think are the harshest, either right before or right after them, there's a much more fun episode. The episode right before Monster's Reflection is Time Gone By, for example. And we still haven't figured out how we're going to lead into the next season, but that's okay. We actually don't need to figure that out until, we're somewhere around here. So we'll deal with that later.
The other thing I was going to say is that, part of the point is that we do have this overall chart and we do want tension to sort of escalate, not because that is some sort of rule handed down from on high, but because that's just a good way to keep people's attention and keep them excited. That's the reason we do it. But also we have other jobs than that, and some of these episodes are ultimately fulfilling other jobs.
Absolutely.
So, for example, in Day That Wouldn't Die, what you are getting is a lot of Juno's backstory. You're getting to know him as a character, and you're going to need that in order to stick with him as a character.
Right.
And in fact, I think that's probably the point at which people start to get more invested, because we're doing more of a character deep dive. And then Midnight Fox, even though, again, it's another episode, both Day That Wouldn't Die and Midnight Fox, we did make sure to put in at least something that contributed towards the main plot, but it could just have been one sentence. In Day That Wouldn't Die, Rita calls Juno on the phone and says one thing, and that's the only contribution we get towards the arc. So it's not that, but rather in Day That Wouldn't Die we get that character exploration, and then in Midnight Fox, actually I think part of what we get is we get a sense of what Juno's job is normally like.
Right. That's true.
Because it would be less meaningful to have this crazy earth-shattering thing that he's doing if we didn't have a sense that that's not really normally what he does.
Right, exactly. And I think that, one of the things that's interesting about engaging the audience with that information in a way that gets them more invested in the character who is going through this arc is we have never let's jump on back now, folks. We have never had anybody point out one of the things that we were most nervous about when we were writing Day That Wouldn't Die, which is that Day That Wouldn't Die does nothing to further the main plot.
Right.
Nada. It's Rita calls out the main plot for 2 seconds in the first 5 minutes, and that is literally it.
It's just a complete left turn.
Yeah.
Somewhere else.
It's Juno Steel Gaiden. And so, but because it fits in this satisfying way and it feels like it's contributing to the kind of engine pushing the plot along to the character, it does not feel that way. It feels very satisfying, right? Now we can go here. So the other thing to look for when you revise is adding in setups so that your payoffs look smarter. All of these, I'll tell you that when we wrote Murderous Mask, we had no idea that ancient Martian artifacts were going to be a thing, because we didn't know this was going to be a series. We didn't know anything, and then suddenly we had to kind of build it from the ground up. I don't even think we really had the ancient Martian artifacts thing figured out until we talked about the teleporters in Prince of Mars.
Yeah.
So, a good chunk of the time that we were planning Prince of Mars, we still had no idea what this season was about. So our initial plan wasn't going to work. Instead, we make these little... Man, I have to use my trackpad now, and I hate it. Instead, we use these, these opportunities to put in these little setups so that once you take in the whole season, it looks like we planned it all along, when actually we're dummies.
Speak for yourself.
We're dummies.
I'm just kidding. I'm a himbo.
So, we add in Martian artifacts to... That is why Rita calls it out for 2 seconds at the beginning of Day That Wouldn't Die. The 2 things I charted in here are when Nureyev comes up and when the Martian artifacts come up. This is the reason that Nureyev mysteriously appears for 2 seconds at the end of Prince of Mars. So this is so that, we know where we're going for the end in terms of both Nureyev and the Martian artifacts. So for our plan, we go back and we put that stuff in. Right. Before we really, really get into writing it. Right.
And I do think that, there's a certain extent to which we put these things in just to, calm maybe nervous audience members. It's okay, we're still going somewhere.
Yeah.
It's okay. So, if you're the kind of listener who's worried about that when you're listening to Day That Wouldn't Die, you'll hear that one thing Rita says, and be like, oh, we're ultimately going somewhere. There's a plan in mind. Or, Nureyev, popping in here and there.
Yep.
It's kind of us being, it's okay, we know.
Right. we had an incredibly long string of episodes during season 2. I think it was at least the entire first half of the season, and it went into the second half of the season.
Yes.
Where Nureyev was cryptically mentioned every single episode.
Right.
Or every single story, right?
Yes.
Not every episode.
Yes.
And we did that very much on purpose.
Yes, just to be like, no, we know.
Right.
We didn't forget.
Exactly. Then we adjust, right? So now we're going to take these dots, and again, we're going to remove the line because that was just a plan. Some things that we need to consider when we're like really finalizing this arc as we're actually writing it, because now we have our outline, right? However, I think the big question that a lot of people are asking is how do you, honor this outline while you are writing an individual story that also needs to be satisfying? So we need to consider as we're writing each episode needs its own arc. We need flexibility to allow for missing setups or misjudgments regarding tension. I think a good example of that is that, like, Angel of Brahma, say, which we still haven't talked about, but we will, ended up being a lot more tense than we intended it to initially. And then we had to, like, consider, okay, what does final resting place have to do in order to still be satisfying after that? And then, hey, what about character development, right? Like, we haven't really talked about what are the moments for our characters to grow and things like that. This is how I would map it if we did the adjustment into this terrifying constellation thing, now featuring tiny stars. These are like the points where I think the tension significantly changes. Sometimes it's in the middle of an episode. The last scene of Data Wouldn't Die, we have a massive cooldown, right? Beginning of Midnight Fox is pretty chill, end of Midnight Fox gets really intense. And now we add in Angel of Brahma because we realize we need this characterization moment to make anybody care about Nureyev, right? And it happens to be a really tense one, so we have to consider how that fits in with everything else, right?
I also think that it is maybe particularly our style to do this thing of, like, to flip at the very, like, end of, like, a story arc. So it's like, it'll be really, really grim for 98% of it, and then at the end something really nice will happen, or like it will be a fun romp, and then at the very, very end, we'll like pull the rug out from under you.
Yeah, absolutely. Another thing that I'm thinking just now as we're looking at that is I actually think that part of our style is that we tend to have huge tension spikes when we have episodes that are primarily characterization. And I think part of that is so that you stay engaged even though the central plot's not really being further. Season 3 is the exception to that because if it wasn't, we would have blown out our own, just completely shattered our own minds by episode 3, right? Because it would need to spike so hard every time.
Right.
It has different priorities. And so remember that all this is being done while the season is being written. This is not stuff that we plan out ahead of time. So this is, we are traveling along this line as we are writing it, right? We're adjusting on the fly. So let's compare where we ended up to that constellation that we ended up with to our initial arc, right? So these dots are where we ended up, and this is the standard plot arc. And so you can see it's not anywhere near perfect. Day That Wouldn't Die, Midnight Fox are way off, and more than half of the dots are not actually on the line, right? But kind of in aggregate, averaged all together, it does trace the line. We have that general shape. So I think the reason that it's useful to bring this up is because this plot arc is really, really useful to consider so you can think about, hey, this is the shape of a default satisfying story, right? We know that people like this shape. They like stories that look like this. And because they like stories that look like this, they have taken in an insane number of them. So you are encouraged to veer from that line as much as you want while understanding what makes it so engaging, right? If Prince of Mars had been the most intense episode of the season, we get to Final Resting Place and have a very, very strong so what feeling, right? So that is why this shape is really satisfying. So, collect it all together because I know there's a lot, and I know that some of you take notes, which blows my mind. So this is so you can kind of gather it all together, right? The sketch is what you do first. It's where you plan major plot or character moments, consider the escalation of a smaller story as a model, right? You're just mapping out these individual moments. Then you revise. Longer stories become exponentially more complicated. So even if this is a kind of production fact, But in terms of writing, our 3-parters don't take me 1.5 times the time to write a 2-parter. It actually takes 2 to 3 times longer. And that is lowballing it, I think, because they become so much more complicated so quickly.
Yeah.
Therefore, you are going to need to reform your original sketch for many considerations, including setups and payoffs, tensions, variation, characterization, and so on. Your called shot at the beginning is never going to be completely accurate. So you need to be ready to change it. And then adjust. You need to allow yourself the flexibility to change your revised plan on the fly as you find out it doesn't work, you find something better, or you find that something's missing, right?
And, like, it is possible that whatever you're doing may not be quite the same as ours, just because maybe you are such a good planner that you actually do write an entire season or an entire show before you start production.
Some people do that.
And good for you if you do, and we very do not.
Yeah.
Especially now. I mean, especially, like, this is some of the most backed up we've ever been.
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
Because of the pandemic, and it's like, we really are flying by the seat of our pants now.
Right.
Like, we basically can't plan at all.
Right, like the next Second Citadel 2-parter, that is, I don't know the release date, so I'm not going to say it, but, like, I'll tell you in real time, and then when it comes out, you can look back and go, oh, wow, like, I just finished it.
Yeah.
Like, yesterday.
Yeah.
So the time crunch is very, very real, right? And even that one had a lot of really intense, like, tonal adjustments based on where we thought the season needed to go. So, one other thing I wanted to include, because people consistently ask us about a collaboration process, so just as a model, when collaborating, it can be really helpful to consider the difference between planning and writing, or sometimes we call it show running and writing, right? The sketch is mostly planning. Sophie and I work on this completely 50-50. We have equal share in terms of, like, say over where the story goes.
Yeah, and as I've said before, there's sort of like the veto rule of, if either of us is like, no, this sucks, the other one has to figure out a way to make it palatable. Like, we have to both like it.
Right. Revision is planning and writing. I do a little bit more of this than Sophie. Sophie adds and gives feedback. And then the adjustment is mostly me, because it's in the moment actually writing the thing.
Yes.
This will be when I, go to Sophie with, like, we had this planned for this episode, but ultimately it just leaves the ending feeling really flat. Can we make this adjustment so that it's more exciting? Right,
or we'll, like, hash out whatever we need to. Or I will burst into your room and say, there needs to be a wedding gown slam!
Yep. Exclusively on the episodes I'm really stuck on. So thank you for that. So we've talked a lot about, the importance of the way that tension changes over the course of a season, and sort of how you can slot in characterization within that arc. But how do we actually raise tension? That's the question.
Helps.
I think we talked about this before, actually. So review number 2, remember stakes. Stakes are what can be gained or lost as a result of the story's events. It's not important that the stakes be large, only that they feel large, and we have very weird priorities when it comes to what feels like large stakes, right? So, for example, you, the audience, actually, you can put your answers in the live channel, and this will be funny to watch this tidal wave. Which one made you more worried? When Miasma was about to kill all life on Mars, or when Ramses affected Juno's hometown?
Yeah. Were you more stressed?
Right. Think about, like, actually, not just the description of it, but the experience of watching the show. During which one were you more stressed out?
Yeah. And, like, don't take into account stuff like where Juno and Nureyev were emotionally at that time. It's just, like, the actual thing that was at stake. Ramses being a dip. Ramses sad face. Ramses bruh. Ramses stresses me out just by existing.
Yeah, it is a tidal wave of Ramseses. And a lot of...
Somebody said Ramses, it was less abstract. Yeah.
And so we're going to get to that in a second, right? But I think that in terms of thinking about high stakes, pretty much everybody agrees on that the second season hits harder in terms of its villain. People to this day will message us about how much Ramses frustrates them. The only thing anybody ever talks about Miasma for is the soup.
Soup.
And, like, that's lovely.
Yes. And she was never intended to be like a character you would really like
No.
dig into. I mean, we actually definitely had conversations about that. We were like, let's do someone who's just evil.
Right.
And well, even though like season 2 is a whole breakdown of why that's not a real concept.
Right.
But that is what we did in season 1. We were like, let's not bother with like, oh, but like maybe if you understood her better, she would, you know, you would understand where she was coming from. And then we like look back into her past and just be like, yeah, she always sucked. Like some people just do.
Just a horrific, murderous misanthrope.
Right.
Similarly, and this time I'm not going to make you put this in the live chat because I think we know the answer, right? Which made you more worried, when Miasma was about to kill all life on Mars, or when Juno left Nureyev, right?
Right, and it's like, I mean, which of those is objectively a bigger deal?
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's like the life of everyone on your planet, or your boyfriend, right? But which would you actually be more worried about?
Yeah, exactly. We actually have somebody pointing out in the live channel now what I think is really important, that for a lot of people, the moment when they hate Ramses most is not when he's affecting the whole city. It's when, you know, you find out what you find out about him in Monsters Reflection. I know that not everybody has watched all the way through season 2, so we won't go into that. Whatever. My eyes are usually open when I listen to a podcast.
Yeah, what was this? Somebody said something I liked. Oh no, where did it go? Somebody said, I'm sorry, I lost it, but somebody said, Miasma worries me like climate change, and Ramses worries me like Trump.
Yeah.
I think that's a great analogy.
And so here's really the code to crack why this is the case, because if you look at literal stakes, how much is at stake? Miasma beats each one of these every time, right? So when we were planning season 2, one of the things that we were really thinking about is how do we make the stakes hit harder? And it's not to make them bigger, because if we did that, then the galaxy or the solar system would be in danger.
Right, and that's boring.
Right.
And I think it was something we specifically wanted to avoid because we felt like we had seen that mistake made before. Like,
Exactly.
I feel like Star Wars has done this.
Mm-hmm.
Like, well, what's scarier than a Death Star? A bigger Death Star. Like,
right.
But nobody cares, right? Did anybody care
Right.
that the new one was bigger? Nobody cared.
I mean, which is unfortunate because I think the original trilogy of Star Wars gets the rule that we're about to get into really.
Yes, and I really think like it totally lost. Oh, somebody. Okay, but Eli Summers just pointed out actually something that I hadn't thought of, which is a good point, which is, yeah, you're going to destroy the planet, but we all know you won't because that's how stories work. But Ramses was like, I really don't know.
Right.
So actually, there's something about the smaller stakes that make it more of a question as an audience member, what's actually going to happen, because, you know, we could have done it.
Yeah, and because we've, you know, proven by that point that we're not above messing with Juno's state.
Right.
So the kind of the key to consider is remember that personal or immediate stakes hit harder than high stakes every single time.
This is actually another good point, which is an illustration of that. Never Out of Key says, I didn't care as much about Old Town as I cared about Mick.
Right.
So, like, even Old Town, the reason that it mattered was because we knew Mick was living there and Juno had this whole relationship with him.
Exactly. The thing that the original Star Wars trilogy really understood was that nobody cares about this big war. Like, you know, I think that there are some people that get really, really into the motions of it. I love those movies, and I don't ever really understand what's going on for the big war, because, to be honest, I'm not paying attention. But by putting a personal relationship in place of it, father and son on opposite sides of a war,
now we care.
Now it's like, oh, their relationship, I'm really worried about them, right? So making the stakes personal is one of many setups you need to add as you go. That's big. We knew that Hyperion City, that Juno, that etc., that even, you know, Juno leaving Nureyev, etc., would all hit harder than the entire planet being in danger, because you don't know about all of Mars. You don't really care.
Right.
You know about Juno. You know about how much the city.
Plus, you can't really wrap your mind around.
Exactly. So setting up season 2 and beyond, what I did here is I took our old graph and I put in, you know, where in the season we got little details that inform what happens in season 2.
This is very satisfying
Isn't
to
it?
me, to look at. It makes me feel very good about myself.
Oh, we're gonna pop that bubble in 2 seconds.
Great.
Episode, like a very first story, you get the info on Juno's family, which comes up big time in season 2. Same with Old Town. We get the hint of weird real estate stuff at the very, very end of season 1.
Oh, and the sewers and the rabbits, too.
The sewers and the rabbits are around here, too, right? And around here. And that comes back. We get Juno's hero complex. We get the connection to Hyperion City. We are setting the stakes by, within season 1. That all looks very smart. But we've established that neither one of us is very smart. I don't want to hear it. We're dummies. And so, as a result, here is what we actually planned ahead of time. These two. And also, we planned both of these around here. When we were writing like Train from Nowhere. All this other stuff, we were just writing stories.
Yeah.
So, where did it come from? How is it that it ended up being so relevant? We're going to return to the toy box again.
Toy box.
One of the biggest thrills of writing a long series is also one of its biggest dangers. You end up taking an insane number of toys out of the toy box. You are constantly introducing new ideas to keep things fresh. When planning future story arcs, before you introduce something new, think, are there any toys you already took out that are worth a second look? This has allowed us to make the stakes, no matter how big they are, feel much more personal over and over and over again. Even in season 3, where I think that the stakes are the biggest they have ever been, the way that we translate those stakes to the audience is through the individual difficulty of one of the characters. I'm speaking very cryptically because I know a lot of people here haven't made it to season 3. But we make sure by pulling a character from a previous story who had a very specific problem, and then making season 3 all about that problem, we start at the level of you already care.
Right.
And it makes us look very smart because it looks like we planned it, when actually we had no idea if we were coming back to that character ever again. We wanted to, after the episode was written, and we liked them, but we really didn't know, right?
Is that true?
No, I think that when we started off, we were like, wouldn't it be cool if, but we weren't sold on it until like the story was or maybe halfway through the draft.
I mean, because that episode was always meant to be a backdoor pilot.
Yeah, this is time gone by. It's
and I remember that because I remember in casting having to have this insane conversation with people of,
You're right.
How would you feel about being in this one episode and also committing to being available next year?
God, yeah, I remember that.
And just for after that, which was like a very big ask.
What I'll say is that in the earliest stages of our planning, that was not our intent. Once we came up with the characters, we realized, what if we went this way?
Yes, I think that is true. I think another thing that I would like to say, though, because this is all true and I really like it and I really stand by it, but also, like, you don't want to just reuse everything all the time. Like, for example, there are plenty of characters who appeared only in season 1 that ever since then people were like, when is this character coming back? And we're like, they're not, because they only happened in season 1 and that's that. And like, we thought about it and then we were like, no, we don't need to bring back every single person because that kind of shrinks the universe.
Exactly.
It's kind of a Star Wars problem again. It's like
suddenly everybody's a Skywalker.
Or Palpatine.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that makes it smaller and kind of disappointing. And so sometimes, like, it's just worth considering things. Like, would this be a good thing to bring back, or should we just leave it and let it be part of making the world bigger?
Right. And that's, completely, like, very much a side note, but that's an even bigger issue in Second Citadel, where we've established this big ensemble of characters that we've gotten you invested in all of them. And there is just not the space to go that deep into all of them again.
It's not possible to develop all of them forever,
Right. So you end up needing to make a lot of really difficult compromises as you go through. So let's do an exercise. We can't practice this whole process.
We can't write an entire serial?
No, we can't write an entire serial. Also, I mean, even like step 1, like, drafting it, that usually happens like you and I over a really, really long, like 2.5 hour long breakfast several times over several weeks. It takes a very long time. However, we are going to practice revision, and the way that we're going to do it is something that we have not done before, and it's entirely possible that it will blow up in our faces, and I'm really, really excited. So let me copy that link. Here I have a simply monstrous Google Doc. This Google Doc is 97 pages. I think that's enough pages. If I had to suspect, I think that's enough pages. I'm going to put that in the Discord. in the announcements channel, so you can check that out here. Google Doc for season revision. What I would like you to do is to head into that Google Doc and...
So in the announcements channel.
In the announcements channel.
Kevin just posted it.
Head to that Google Doc. I believe it sets that you will all be anonymous. I'm pretty sure, so you don't have to worry. I did my best on that front. Yes, somebody showed up and they are anonymous. I want each person to claim their own page. You can show us that you've claimed your page by like changing all the text to another color or something. That will also show us which pages to look at. And what I want you to do is this. Claim a page for yourself and add to this story, which we've gone over a couple of times, in order to turn this episode plot arc into a season plot arc. We're taking Verona's story about releasing the rats into the school so that she has time to paint and kill the demons, and we're turning it from one episode into a full season, right? Feel free to add or delete as many rows as you want. In order to add, you right-click, insert row. I put that in there because I had to stumble around and figure that out while I was making this. So everybody claim a page. This is the basic outline that we started with, right? I want each of you to add to that outline, and over the next, I don't know, you want to give them like 5-10 minutes?
Okay.
Over that next period of time, we're just going to scroll, see what people are up to, see what they're thinking, and shout out some like amazing directions that everybody takes.
Cool.
I'm really excited to see you all plan very different seasons for Verona, right?
I love that people are anonymous and then like some animal.
Yeah.
I love that it does that.
Mm-hmm.
That's thrilling.
All right, we got 43 people in here. So 97, maybe I overshot a little. If you want, you and your group can work together on one page.
Bless this mess.
Oh, it's wonderful. Oh, it's wonderful.
People just writing dibs. Mods are thrilled that they don't have to moderate this doc. Mods are asleep.
All right, people are already messing with different stages in here, which I absolutely love. Some people are starting at the beginning. Some people are starting at where the plot starts to develop. Gonna try not to eavesdrop on anybody while they're in the middle of writing, because I know that is the most stressful experience.
Oh, apparently it's crashing for some people.
The doc or the stream?
I'm assuming the doc? Or, oh. I'm not sure.
We'll be right on that, folks. That is likely to happen when we have this
the
many.
doc,
Okay.
yeah.
Do your best. You know, if you notice you've been writing on a page that somebody else has already claimed, you know, try to find a new page. We're experimenting here. This is an exercise that I usually do with 20 students. So
yeah, I was curious about how that was going to go.
yeah, I wanted to know. All right. All right, we have somebody who's putting in a lot of setup for Verona. It looks like these thoughts are basically done, so we can take a look at that, right?
Cool.
Verona's been seeing demons since she was 4 years old. She has a single demon who, and it's been redacted, so we can move along.
Yeah, sorry it's crashing, but I don't think there's anything we can do about it. It's just there's so many people. Verona's grad, what? Oh, I'm so curious. But I shouldn't look.
Yeah, we can keep moving. Some people are noticing that I completely goofed, and instead of the instructions always saying 1, 2, 3, they keep on growing over the course of the doc.
Oh my gosh. Verona's the demon rat painter god and has exams cancelled. This produces the idea that there are portals to other demon realms and occult powers surrounding paint.
That is great.
Okay.
And we're going so many different directions. We had another one where, like, you know, this started with like a legend in a village, and this is really, really rad. And of course, we'll make sure that you all have access to this document after it's done, so you can take a look at the bonkers ideas that everybody had.
Oh my gosh. Did you see that one?
No, what was it?
About Verona having to collect hamsters? I know where that's going.
To harvest fur to access the portals. Y'all are doing God's work in here. Oh, it's crashing a little bit for us, too. We have a group here that's working together.
Oh, nice.
That's fantastic.
Is there anything we can do while
They're doing this?
Yeah, rather than just scrolling through.
That's
fine.
That's a good question. So let's scroll back up to the top. Well, I don't know. Do you want to talk about what we would do?
How we would plan it out?
Yeah.
Sure.
Let's see. So if you're likely to be distracted by us talking about this, feel free to like turn your volume down or mute it, and we will both wave at the screen when we're done, so that you know we're back. Okay. I like the idea. Actually, I might have Verona's backstory happen in like episode 2. Episode 1 is just like a day in the life.
Yes.
You know what I mean?
Yes.
So, we see what is a typical demon hunt with Verona.
I can only see this as like, just like it has a very Kim Possible vibe.
Yep.
To me. So I do feel like everything demon related is like very normal.
Yeah.
It's just like part of it, and it has much more the flavor of like a teen like comedy.
Kind of a Kim Possible, Sabrina the Teenage Witch.
Exactly.
Nice.
And I see it as an animated
Yes.
thing too in my head for sure.
Nice. So yeah, we're kind of talking through, and episode 1 has the purpose of world building and like establishing what this usually looks like.
We meet her friend group.
Meet her friends. Episode 2 is either backstory, or it might be when we actually get into what is currently the introduction, right? The rising threat of the exams. Somebody has claimed the page that we're looking at. So yeah, in that way, you're not just padding out at the beginning; you're also getting the audience to like kind of slide in and feel comfortable in this world.
Yeah. Well, okay, so you said for episode 2 is where you would do backstory, and I actually don't feel like Verona needs that much backstory, but I actually feel like we get some world building backstory in the second episode, and like start with that at the beginning of that episode, so it's gonna feel like whiplash.
Yeah.
And then show how that connects to where we are now.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. I really like that. Some people in the live channel are suggesting, so I forgot to change my name back, is suggesting that you copy-paste your chart into another doc, or copy your chart into another doc, and then paste it back in your doc. So yeah, absolutely, go for it. Also, if you don't want to share, feel free to just copy this and do it on your own. That's A-okay.
Okay, so we got into the backstory.
All right.
I mean, how long do we want this whole season to be?
How long are our seasons usually? How many stories?
Well,
like 6 or 7 stories?
What's usually? We had a season 1 and then we had a season 2 that was twice that long.
Oops. Let's do season 1 length. I think that was 7 stories.
Okay.
So we have episode 1 is the typical job, right? Episode 2 is maybe some background world building, is what we were saying.
Yeah, and then I think at the end of it, there's like a big thing in the present that happens. So maybe that is when.
I see, right? So at the end of episode 2, we see like the demon rift open up, and then Verona's really got to be on the job.
Yeah.
Episode 3 is really like high stakes demon fighting that, in a way that Verona thinks is remarkable, right? We need to have the sense that this is not just any, week or any month in Verona's life. This is a special one. Right.
Oh, you know what else, though? The rope is a snake moment was the principal's a rat king. So we had to introduce the principal in the beginning.
Yep. I think
in episode 1.
Yep. Principal shows up in episode 1 and he's a tool. We start to get hints that there's something more going on in episode 2.
Yeah.
So even as we're talking through this, you're seeing that we're adding setups later on once we go through and we tell the story.
Well, in fact, actually, what I think I would do is that by around the time of episode 2, we get to know the principal in a way that we like him a little bit more. Mm-hmm. I mean, I feel like that's what we usually do.
Yeah.
Right? So that then we have some stakes, and it sucks when it turns out he's a racket.
Yes, that makes a lot of sense. Nice. So yeah, things escalate. We have the sense that this is not a typical job for Verona. She's just barely got it under control, and I think that's when we learn about the exams. Mm-hmm. So the exams are one of many rope as a snake moments, actually. Sure. Because it looks like this is just going to be a demon hunting story, right? In the next episode, maybe, because we just introduced the exams as stakes, so we should probably use that toy since we took it out of the toy box, right? It can be an episode about Verona trying to juggle demon hunting and studying for her exam.
Right.
And in the process, at the end of the episode, she fails a test that she was supposed to study for, and that's when she realizes this can't work. This is not a good option. Mm-hmm.
This isn't even like storytelling, but also because this is an animated show, the opening credits are all like painting.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah.
Yeah, she's like painting over.
Yes.
Yeah, that's right.
It's being pointed out to me that we are sort of getting towards the time that we usually open it up for questions and stuff.
Yep. So, you know what? Given that it's been 10 minutes, we said 10 minutes, let's scroll through and see what people are thinking. I don't expect anybody to have a full revised season.
Whoa, there's a lot of stuff.
This group has done a lot. So, we told you the version that we would take from here. So let's see what... thought that was a name? It says dibs. Let's see what Anonymous Alligator's up to. Verona's the only one who's ever seen these demons. Verona isn't a demon hunter. To the best of her knowledge, they can't actually be killed. She's terrified of them. They're very sleep paralysis.
Wait, didn't we say we were going to wave when we were done?
Oh.
We're waving, just in case you turn off the volume.
Hi. Then, there we go. Yeah, let's go back to this. So already, this is very different from what we were talking about, right? One of the first things that you said is demons are just an understood thing.
Right.
And this one...
the opposite of that.
Yeah, this one's much scarier.
Yes.
If ours is Sabrina the Teenage Witch, this one's Netflix Sabrina.
Yeah, Chilling Adventures.
Yeah. This is one person. Anonymous Alligator's name is Harry? I think. I'm sorry if I got that wrong. But this is really cool so far. So then Verona releases rats in the school. She releases 2 waves of rats. The first is unsuccessful. This occurs after the first unsuccessful release. Strange dream in which she sees a strange world covered in the demons. She tries to keep at bay. There are other people, other regular humans that she's never seen before, talking to the demons. Some of them have musical instruments. Every single one of them seems to be pursuing an art. Despite the fact that the world is full of demons, the demons seem calm. You know what? If you were muted while Sophie and I were talking about our plan, don't even bother to go back and listen to it, because this is a million times better. This rules.
Oh my god!
After that release, there's a second attack, possibly with the assistance of her girlfriend Jan.
I love all the really intense Verona Jan shippers.
You gotta love it.
Gerona?
Van. It only seems to work after the two of them are startled by the noise of the school band suddenly beginning to play. They think the demons come out with the fear. What the audience doesn't know is the key is the music. However, because the music stopped, they were agitated, not calmed, so the rope is a snake. This is fantastic. I am
really cool.
So addicted to this. Demons have a war cry they call as they possess the rats, strangely musical. It took the music toy out of the toy box early.
Yes.
In fact...
Oh my god, Mari is just ahead of us.
That's amazing. No, in fact, took the art toy out of the toy box initially because of Verona's paintings. Mm-hmm. Then changed it to then specified it to a music toy.
Yes.
This is really,
great.
really
Love
cool.
That.
You even get little
if it's audio based, that becomes the demon's theme. Just Galaxy Brain.
This is fantastic.
Galaxy Brain.
I'm not sure how we get here, but the key of the season, Verona is going to figure out the demons are actually attached to the music. They need to find peace in their lives. They're friends, but they need time to figure it out. Verona's painting helps as well.
Okay, this is rockin' because I'm not sure how we get here, but the key of the season is. That is really good planning.
Yes.
Because you don't need to know right now.
Yes.
You will figure it out later. You know that you need to get from point A to point B. You haven't figured out how yet. You'll figure it out as you go, and you're leaving yourself the flexibility. That's really good.
Yeah, when you hit a moment like that, when you're planning, it can feel really bad, and you can feel like you're not doing your job. But actually, the thing that we have found over and over again is that in a lot of ways, that's the most responsible thing you can do. Is leave those blank spaces. Allow yourself to figure out how you're going to get there. Because the target that Hyrie is shooting for rules. This is really, really good. Want to scroll down and see what somebody else is doing?
Sure.
And then we'll move on to questions.
Nice one.
That is awesome.
Yeah, this is so cool.
Let's just scroll down a couple, so we can actually we did a bunch up top. Let's go down towards the middle, say. Okay. Actually, that one.
Go. That seems like how.
All right. This one's got a lot.
Okay, Verona has just discovered these demons. Oh, this is Ray, and I can't tell if eyes is somebody's name or just a thing we're saying.
I think it might be a shortcut for an emoji. I think it's Ray. I think this is Ray.
Okay, I think it's Ray too. Verona has just discovered these demons. Her sister threw a can of paint at Verona, and all of a sudden Verona's weird phone problems disappear. She goes online. Is she an exorcist? No, they are demons. The demons come back. Verona decides to take up painting. And all of a sudden there are way more demons. Worst thing, exams are 2 weeks from now and she hasn't started studying. The principal is flirting with her older sister. Oh my god! Okay, great.
I'm hooked after episode 1.
Yes.
Because I'm super stressed out.
Yes, her annoying sister who threw the paint also breeds rats. Verona is not okay, so we're setting up the rats.
That's so good.
Not a fan of the rats, but she's also not a fan of school. Her sister loves these rats. She's a huge rat breeder. She has a very popular eBay channel. Relevance? I share. No, that's great.
That's a great example of what we talked about just putting in details that might end up being setups.
You're great.
Maybe we never come back to the eBay channel. Even by itself, the fact that her older sister sells rats on eBay is great characterization.
Yeah. So now I'm in.
Yeah.
She's thinking about senior prank day and the school over that got canceled and how now there's all this really chaotic, messy things happening with extermination. She brings the rest to school. School gets canceled.
Where do we go? I want to see the story. Okay.
Verona cries. The principal is not only a rat king, but also the man who is financing her sister's rat breeding business. He's her sister's sugar rat king.
This piles on the tension and it makes the stakes personal.
Yes.
That's huge.
Yes. It's cool because, there was no sister in the original, thing that we came up with. But, why not?
Mm-hmm.
Why not? That's great.
Mm-hmm.
She finds out the demons who weren't corporeal before are possessing the demons by trying to check out what happened at school and seeing the rats who used to be very kind trying to attack her sister. Not only is the principal a rat king, he's also possessed.
Wonderful.
Great.
Wonderful.
It's announced her exams will be online. Oh no. Verona asks her sister how she's doing and her sister is crying over this picture of her rat breeder sugar daddy. She feels guilty and doesn't know what she's going to do, so she paints a picture of him to apologize for losing her sister's rats and getting her sister's boyfriend low-key possessed. Oh wow. Her sister makes her give the painting to the king and oh wow, he's stuck in the painting.
Wow.
Verona sneaks into the school during the time for online exams because you know what, she probably would have failed anyway, and she does a mural of the rats on the walls of the school and it depossesses the demons. Verona and her sister collab on her... Do you want to collab? On a rat breeding and rat painting eBay channel, and Verona finally makes money and goes to a private school that helps her with her issues in school.
I love that fake out because the stakes that we started with, failing the exam, the assumption is that she's going to find a way to pass it.
Yeah.
And this finds a satisfying way for her to fail it.
Right.
And
it's addressed, but it isn't solved.
Yes. This is absolutely fantastic. I think that was Ray, right?
Yeah.
Yes. Thank you so much, Ray. I think that's the only other one that we have time to share because we have a couple other things, including something very exciting to announce. So you can always come back to this later, check out what everybody else did. If the two that we looked at are any indication, these rule. I will be reading more of these for sure.
That's so cool. Good work.
Really. So let's do our home work. Your final drafts are due next Friday night. Submit either the full draft or your favorite section of it to the submit channel. Unless your story's quite short, It's unlikely that we'll read the entire thing next time. Sorry, it takes a very long time to read things out loud.
Yeah, so honestly, in a certain way, it might be in your best interest to either only submit a short section or to let us know which section it is that you're really submitting.
Yeah.
Because otherwise, we'll pick a part that we pick, and it might not be your favorite part or the part that you really want read.
And in speaking of picking those parts, prepare yourselves because we have something very special planned for some of you who submit for next week. Are we ready to announce it?
Oh, is it going to be that I am going to read all of the submissions out loud and I'm going to be playing all the parts? Is that the special surprise?
No, we had a meeting about this.
Oh.
You're not going to do that.
Oh.
No. In fact, what we're doing and what we've been kind of putting together over the last couple weeks, I think, is we've been asking some of your favorite voices from the Penumbra if they want to check out the Submit channel, pick stories that they really liked, and read them for you all next week.
Yay!
It's going to be great.
So you will find out next week exactly who those people are. And we're still kind of finalizing it now anyway, but we're hoping that will be inspiration for you, encouragement for you to post your submission because one of your favorite voices might be the one reading it out loud.
Absolutely.
So none of them have read any of your submissions yet. And obviously they're going to have to pick at the last minute because I know that people will be submitting right up to the deadline.
Yep. My guess, the reason that we're saying Friday night is the deadline is because I'm guessing they're going to use Saturday morning to figure out which one they want.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. So do try to get it in time so that they have time to take a look, but they will be taking a look through and picking their favorites. And yes, if you submit for the first time this week, do you still have a chance to get picked up by them? Absolutely. Everyone, because they won't know anyway, they haven't been here, so they won't know who has submitted before and who hasn't. So it won't be based on whether we've read your submissions before, whether you've submitted before, any of that. They're just going to pick the ones they like.
And that question is from Vari, whose name
we've been mispronouncing.
Just butchering. Just absolutely destroying. Thank you for your patience, Vari. So, with all that, any questions?
Yay!
It's time for questions, y'all. Let's talk for, we can do 10 or 15 minutes, right?
Yeah.
So over on the live channel, as per usual, put in your questions. Next week is going to be mostly sharing, so this is our last lesson,
yes.
We might have a little time for questions next week, but I'm not even sure we will.
But if you have burning questions, now would be the time.
Because our celebration's on my birthday, and I don't work on my birthday, so...
Kevin's birthday.
I'm excited. I'm really excited.
Yeah. So, yes, as the mod just pointed out, if you're just screaming, keep that in the general channel. But we are taking questions if you have questions.
I'm very, very excited that multiple people have now commented that this is inspiring them to finish their stories. Because guess what? We got you. That was the point.
Yay! What qualifies as short for the submissions?
It's a good question. I think we can go a little bit longer than we've been going in terms of submissions that we pick. The longest we've really gone for reading a submission was 500 words. I think we could probably read a submission that was 1,000 words.
Yeah?
Is that too long?
But then if everybody's posting 1,000-word submissions and we have a bunch of people reading them, will really take a long time. I would keep it as closer to 500.
Yeah, let's say 700. 700 words. Because it's a special occasion. I want y'all to be able to share more of what you did.
Yeah.
Let's say 700 words.
This is very specific. How long is too long for a theme song? I feel like your theme song, you don't want to be longer than a minute.
Yeah.
I'm just going to throw that out there.
Unless it's if it's longer than that, you're taking a big gamble. Because if it's super catchy, people will sit there and watch it the whole time. But
listen to it.
Then watch it.
Listen to it.
I'm thinking about JoJo's Bizarre Adventure, honestly, and I watch those. They're very colorful and wonderful, and I watch them every time, and I never skip them. But you're taking a big gamble because if they don't, they're just going to be annoyed when they sit through it. So try to keep it short.
Are people allowed to submit more than one thing?
I don't know. What's your gut on that?
I think yes.
Yeah.
We won't read aloud more than one thing per person, but yeah, sure. Um, how do you balance changing tension and not having filler episodes? I mean, what's a filler episode?
A filler,
like one where nothing happens?
Yeah, an episode where, like, you know, you get to the end of it and you feel like it could just as easily have not happened. You know what I mean? I mean, I think that the way that we try to seed the main plot in every episode in some small way is part of what helps that. I mean, even the episode that has the least to do... No, that's not true. But, like, even the side story episodes that we were talking about, we do put in a little hint, right? In Midnight Fox, it's really not until the last second that you realize why it's relevant.
But it also isn't filler anyway.
Right.
I mean, but also it's weird because, like, I feel like when you talk about filler, that implies that you have a certain amount of episodes that you need to hit.
Yeah.
And if you're doing your own thing, I don't know why you would.
That's
like,
true.
It's not like, unless you are writing a TV show, in which case good for you, and you don't need our advice. But, like, we do as many episodes as we feel like doing, so there should never be any reason for filler, because otherwise we would just not write the episode.
I think one of the other trademarks of filler because of that is, because it's just there to take up space, is nothing really changes by the end. We don't have a sense that there was any progression of any kind. So as soon as you have an episode where things progress, it's not filler. You're good.
Yeah. How to keep balance between grand scale, insane sci-fi fun fights and intimate character drama. I mean, make the insane sci-fi fun fights part of the character drama, I would say.
There's a reason that characters flirt during fights on our show.
Is there?
Repeatedly. And it's because it's both at the same time, you know what I mean? And it's really, really fun to write and I think to listen to as a result. So very often you can have them overlap one another, is I guess what we're saying. Otherwise, I think we just try to think about what have we done a lot of lately and how can we vary it. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Boy, what a question. Oh, Claire, what's the number one thing to consider with writing in general and in serials? What's the one thing? Go!
You have to actually write it.
Ugh, you always say that.
It's boring.
But I guess if you were going to ask such a broad question.
Yeah. I mean, it's boring, but also, like, you know, one of the things that I am always really aware of and that I've been focused on and I guess a little nervous about in terms of how we've needed to structure writing fiction across the void because there are so many of you and because we're so distant from you and we can't give feedback on everything, is that in some ways watching long tutorials about how to write is a way to stall from actually writing, and a way to stall from actually getting better at writing. Knowing all this stuff alone is not going to help you. When you start applying this stuff, especially if you're fairly new to this, you are going to mess up every rule that we've said, and sometimes that's going to be a real bummer, and sometimes you're going to realize that we were talking out our butts and we don't know what we're saying, right? You need to write so that you can make those mistakes, so that you can see where your style diverges from ours and where you think we have a point. Right? So the number one thing is you actually got to write it. Sorry.
How do you do edits on such a short timeline when it comes to the penumbra? Do you want to zoom in on your face again?
I would need to open up some settings to do
Do you want to just go very close to the camera?
Yeah, no, it's stressful. It's really stressful.
It's just awful. I don't know that we have a good answer. It's awful, and it's by the skin of our teeth.
We work on the show a lot. We spend a kind of insane amount of time working on the show.
Yeah.
And also we get feedback from a lot of people. So that helps a lot too. Also, I think revision has gotten faster the longer that we've been doing this. Drafting still takes as long or longer. Revision has gotten faster because I know what mistakes I'm probably going to make, so I can look out for them.
How do you write stories with multiple main characters who each have their own arcs?
So this is more of a second Citadel question, I feel like. Or a season 3 Juno question.
Right. I mean, I feel like we've addressed it a little bit. It's a combination of a lot of things, which is like, well, they should intersect with each other and like be influenced by one another. Also, depending on how you do it. So, for example, if you're looking at season 3 of Juno, like you're not going to be able to have them all follow a beginning of season to end of season gentle arc
Right.
at the same time. It's like, you know, what we kind of end up doing is like that
Yes.
for each person.
Right. The structure of Juno season 3, the way that we have it planned out, is weird. It's something that we haven't tried before, and it definitely goes outside of that plot arc that we talked about. And I think it's going to be really satisfying. I'm really excited about it, and also for reasons that we can't really say right now. So much of it is like reliant on using some of these episodes from different characters' perspectives as a bunch of separate setups. So that you get to know the characters, and then we'll give you some really explosive payoffs. But the setups are going to take way longer, right?
With respect to leaving white space on the map and all, do you have to have an ending in mind for all of your arcs that feed into each other? Do you have one for either major Penumbra arc, actually? And how much should the ending be allowed to change as you build your arcs out over seasons? I think that by season 1... Well, actually, halfway through season 1, I feel like I had one idea for the end of the Juno series, and by the end of season 1, I was like, not that.
Yep.
And then we've been riding along with, like, sort of a general idea since then, and now I might be changing my mind again.
Same. It keeps adjusting, and, you know, the problem of not planning everything when you start, because you're going to get better and better as you do it, just becomes even more intense if you're writing something over the course of years.
Right.
We are way better at this than we were 4 years ago. You know, I think that the people here like what we're doing now more than what we were doing then, but also just in terms of being able to do it, we're a lot better at it. We're a lot more consistent. Right. So we change our minds as we go through. For Juno, we have always had a tentative ending in mind. For Second Citadel, I feel like we have an end game in mind.
Yes.
We have a last story arc, and we don't really know what's going to happen in that, but we know
Right.
what the premise is.
Right. But I don't know. Also, it's kind of a fun thing because we've had like Q&As over the years and interviews and stuff like that. And sometimes I think it'll be funny if like by the time we finish the show, somebody goes back and listens to those things, because some of that stuff might actually not be true.
Oh, absolutely.
You know? So, like, people will have asked us, you know, around the time of season 2 about certain things, and we will give answers that were true at the time, but they might not be true anymore.
Right.
Sorry if we lied.
I'm always really aware during the Q&As that I sound like two very different people in an argument across the Q&As from each season.
Yeah, like, things were true at the time, and, like, then we kind of do end up changing our minds. So, like, yes, white space. You need it. How applicable would you say the series guide is to a long-form piece like a novel? Pretty applicable, except that you have the kind of the upper hand of you get to do the whole thing before you put it out.
Yes.
Whereas, like, you know, Kevin always says, like, building the plane while you're flying it.
Yeah, and I think that in order... this is really helpful for me, because I'm a real dummy, and I can't fit that much in my head, actually. I get really stressed out if I try to fit too many plot beats in my head. So thinking about a project like a novel in terms of smaller episodic story arcs that lead up to a big story, even if those arcs aren't broken up into parts, is really helpful, right? You know, the characters go on this adventure, then they go on this adventure, they go on this adventure, etc.
There's a bunch of questions left, and I don't think we have time to get to all of them, so I'm just going to try and pick a few. How do you avoid using crutch words? Kevin just does, and I yell at him about it.
Yeah. Co-writing's great for that.
Oh, this one I actually really like. Eli Summers is asking, where do you find your value as storytellers and writers? Like, what moments affirm for you that, yes, I'm doing something that is adding real significant value to society? I mean, okay, maybe we should give separate answers for this. Like,
we should.
A lot of times I am, like, I feel very humbled and grateful that I'm in a situation where a lot of people come to us and say, thank you so much. I feel like this really spoke to me. This was what I needed to hear. And I love that. And also, yes, I'm writing it for you, but I'm also just not at all. Like, I'm so often just writing the things that I need to hear. And telling the stories that I need in the world. And it's weird because they come from us and we put them down on the page and we have people perform them and whatever. So it's like they came out of us. But then sometimes I'll listen to an episode and be like, I really needed to hear that.
Yeah.
Even though it came right from us, you know, but still having it exist in the world like that is just what I needed. And I think that has inherent value. And then, of course, because other people are much like me and much like Kevin, there's going to be other people for whom it resonates too. And I like to think that it improves the world in that way. And I, especially in such an incredibly dark time right now in human history, like, I'm very grateful that I can still feel good about what I'm doing with my life, because I think that something that brings joy into the world is of inherent value.
Mm-hmm.
You know, making people smile and laugh and think and cry and whatever, like, that is just good.
We all need a place to recharge so we can get back up and fight the good fight.
Because otherwise, what are we doing it for?
Yeah.
You know? So that's kind of where I'm at.
Yeah, exactly. I think that for me, my answer is very similar to yours in the sense that I feel like I'm writing for me. And the moments where I feel that the most are, if we're talking about the whole season plan, the adjustment section, where I'm writing an episode and making little discoveries as I do it. That is always the part that makes me feel the best. And it's because I said it as a joke a bunch of times, but I do think that one thing that you need to acknowledge in order to be a really honest writer or storyteller is that the conclusions that you have when you start exploring an idea are very often wrong, because the fact is you just haven't thought about them that much. And over the course of telling the story, you need to be willing to change your own mind and to adapt. I won't get into it, but the kind of big lesson that like Rita learns in the most recent two-parter was a lesson that I learned over the course of writing it. I didn't know that. I have always had a problem where I like try way too hard to help other people to the point where it stresses me and them out. And I only really discovered the way in which that was inherently a problem by putting these characters in this situation and just kind of organically discovering, like, oh, I think this is true. And when those kind of flashes of discovery also hit other people from your reactions, those are the moments that speak the most to me.
Yeah, and yeah, sometimes. I think we've probably talked about this before, but like sometimes the show is a little bit ahead of us.
100%.
You know, like sometimes the show says things before we have internalized them ourselves. And I think a good example of that is Juno being non-binary, which he was not non-binary when we like, not pen to paper, but like started writing the show.
That was not our initial conception of the character.
Right. He was a guy. Like the specific point, as I think we've said before, was that we wanted like a bi man because at that time, and kind of still now, but particularly at that time, 5 years ago, we were like, where's the bi men in media? There's none. There's literally zero.
One of many reasons we went back and redid Murderous Mask, actually, because we recognized that Juno is not the person you end up with.
So like he wasn't non-binary when we started, and the first couple times that he refers to himself as a lady you can tell it doesn't really line up with how it's expressed later, because it's kind of as a joke and the pronouns don't really line up, and that's just because Kevin was just joking the first couple times. And then when we got to Midnight Fox, I was like, no, what if we stick to it? What if he actually does think of himself as a lady? And like nobody knew what that meant. I'm not saying people in the wider world didn't know, but like we didn't know what that meant. And I remember talking to friends about it and then being like, that's not a thing. Like that doesn't make any sense. Right. And I actually wasn't particularly able to defend it at that time. I was just like, I'm just gonna, we're just going with it. And then like in the process of writing it, just sticking to it and just being like, no, by God, he's a lady. And like, that's how it is. And then it started to make more sense as we wrote. And that's how I figured out I was non-binary, you know, like, but it was ahead of us. It was a decision we made before we were there ourselves. So lucky to have it.
And that keeps happening. It happens over and over and over again. And I think that when it doesn't happen, when we feel like we're just saying something that we already know, that's when I, anyway, feel like an episode's a clunker and we need to really refigure it out. We try not to let those episodes get to you. Yeah. Because then it's dishonest. You know what I mean?
Yeah, this show is our journey. Like this show, and I'm not going to answer any more questions today because like now we're getting really deep into this one, but this show is a map of the last 5 years of our lives.
100%.
You know, it's the things we've said to each other and said to ourselves, and the things that, you know, we felt like we needed to hear.
Yeah. Many of Juno's decisions, especially early in season 1, at the time I thought they were a little bad, but not that bad. And now, especially his behavior during like Prince of Mars, I find kind of reprehensible, and I find it kind of shocking that so many people make it through that episode.
Well, also, we are now in post Me Too.
Yes, that's true. That's true.
We started writing this in 2015, and like 5 years is not a very long time, but actually a lot has changed since then.
That's true. There's huge cultural changes.
Yeah.
Yeah. I like that as a note to end our last lesson on.
Yeah, that's kind of why I wanted to stop. So that doesn't mean that we won't take any more questions ever again. Maybe next week what we could do is, in between reading submissions, we could take a question here or there.
Yeah, because
to kind of
tech-wise, it's going to take a little bit to get people on there.
So this doesn't have to be the end of all questions for all time, but I think we should leave it there for today.
Yeah, discover it. You got to write it in order to discover it, in order to make sure it's honest.
Yeah.
Thank you, everybody. And really, really thank you. It is very bittersweet for me that we are at the end of our lessons. I've said it before, but I'll say it again. This has been, in a really alienating time, this has been one of the most consistently heartening and satisfying things going on in my life.
Yes, and it would not be without you.
Yeah. Multiple people, when I tell them that our last episode is on my birthday, have told me, like, oh, that's a bummer. Couldn't you end it earlier? And I've told them, like, no, you don't get it. I planned this so that I would end
Yeah, it's his birthday party.
Right. This is what I want. And it has so much to do with everything that you all have brought to it. So keep bringing it. You're also inspiring to us, honestly.
And we're so excited to read your submissions for next week. Check out that thread that we put in the description if you want to help with those GoFundMes for Black trans women's transitions. And I think we'll leave it there for today.
Sounds great. We'll see you all next week, everybody, next Saturday.
Bye.
Bye.